The dodo, a name that echoes through history as a symbol of extinction, of loss, of human folly. A bird that once waddled across the forests of a remote island, entirely unaware that it would become the world's most famous casualty of mankind's arrival. This is not a tale of survival, but of disappearance, not of adaptation, but of obliteration. The dodo of Mauritius, a creature so strange, so trusting, so perfectly suited to its island paradise that when the world came knocking it had no defense. A bird that could not fly, that feared nothing, that had evolved in splendid isolation for millions of years. And in less than a century after human contact, it was gone, vanished, a ghost of the Indian Ocean. The story of the dodo is a tragedy, but it is also a lesson. A stark reminder that islands are fragile, that evolution does not prepare creatures for the unnatural, and that once a species is lost, no science, no regret, no longing can bring it back. To understand the dodo, we must journey back in time, back to an island untouched, a paradise before the fall. Mauritius, a volcanic island born from the fiery depths of the ocean floor, rose from the waves roughly 8 million years ago. Isolated, lush, and fertile, it sat in the southwestern Indian Ocean, east of Madagascar, a jewel of biodiversity waiting to be written. No mammals walked its forests. No predators prowled its undergrowth. Only birds, reptiles, insects, and plants claimed this Eden. Into this sanctuary, sometime around 4 million years ago, a pigeon arrived. Perhaps blown off course by a storm, perhaps riding favorable winds, a small group of pigeons from Southeast Asia found themselves stranded on this remote volcanic rock. But stranded is the wrong word. They had found paradise. With abundant fruit, no predators, and endless space, these pigeons thrived. Over millennia, they changed. Evolution, that patient sculptor, began its work. Flight became less necessary. Food was on the ground everywhere, no need to escape into the sky. Wings shrank. Bodies grew larger, heavier. Legs thickened to support the increasing weight. Beaks enlarged and hooked, perfect for cracking open hard fruits and seeds. Feathers became softer, fluffier, less structured for aerodynamics. Generation by generation, the pigeon became something new, something extraordinary, something that would one day be called Raphis cuculatus, the dodo. By the time humans would first lay eyes on it, the dodo had become a bird unlike any other. Standing nearly a meter tall, weighing between 10 and 18 kilograms, it was a giant among pigeons. Its body was bulky, round, and covered in soft gray and brown plumage. The wings were tiny, vestigial, useless for flight, mere flaps of feather and bone pressed against its sides. The tail was a comical tuft of curled feathers, more decoration than function. But the most striking feature was the head. Large, bulbous, with a massive hooked beak that curved downward, ending in a sharp point. The beak was not uniform in color. The base was greenish-gray, the tip a dark horn. Around the base of the beak, the face was bare, a patch of naked skin. The eyes, small and dark, sat on either side of the broad skull. The legs were short, thick, and powerful, ending in four-toed feet built for walking, scratching, and balance. The dodo was not graceful, it was not elegant, but it was perfectly adapted. A ground-dwelling frugivore, a seed disperser, an integral thread in the ecological tapestry of Mauritius. It waddled through the forests, feeding on fallen fruits, nuts, and seeds. It had no fear. Why would it? There was nothing to fear. The dodo's life was one of simplicity and abundance. The forests of Mauritius were thick with ebony trees, palms, and hardwoods. Fruits fell in plenty. The dodo's digestive system was robust, capable of breaking down tough seeds that other creatures could not. In fact, some trees depended on the dodo. The seeds passed through its gut, scarified and ready to germinate. The dodo was not just a resident of the forest. It was a gardener, a partner in the cycle of life. It nested on the ground, laying a single large white egg in a crude nest of palm leaves and grasses. Both parents, it is believed, took turns incubating the egg and caring for the chick. The young dodo grew slowly, taking months to reach full size. There was no rush. No predator threatened the nest. No mammal raided the eggs. Time was a luxury the dodo could afford. The island was a closed system, balanced and stable. The dodo had no concept of the outside world, no knowledge that beyond the horizon, civilizations rose and fell, ships sailed, and explorers dreamed of new lands. Mauritius was the universe, and in that universe the dodo was safe. But isolation is a double-edged sword. It protects, but it also leaves vulnerable. Evolution on islands often leads to naivety. Without predators, prey animals lose their fear. Without competition, they lose their aggression. The dodo had no instinct to flee, no wariness of large creatures, no understanding that not all visitors come in peace. This innocence, this trust would be its undoing. For centuries, the dodo lived in blissful ignorance, but the world was shrinking. The age of exploration had begun. European powers, hungry for trade routes for spices for land, sent ships across uncharted waters. The Indian Ocean, once a vast and empty expanse, became a highway, and Mauritius, remote and unspoiled, was about to be discovered. The first recorded human contact with Mauritius came in the early 16th century. Portuguese sailors navigating the route to India likely sighted the island. But they did not settle. They left no lasting mark. It was the Dutch who would change everything. In 1598, a Dutch fleet commanded by Admiral Wybren van Warwick landed on the island. They named it Mauritius after Prince Maurice of Nassau. The sailors explored, hunted, and marveled at the strange creatures they found. Among them a large, flightless bird that showed no fear. The sailors called it Dodars, meaning fatars in Dutch, or Dodo, meaning sluggard. The name stuck, corrupted over time into Dodo. The Dutch found the dodo easy to catch. It did not run. It did not fight. It simply stood, curious, as men approached with clubs. The meat was described as tough and unpalatable, greasy and unappetizing. But for sailors long at sea, starved of fresh provisions, it was food. And so the killing began. The Dutch established a settlement on Mauritius in 1638. They came for ebony, the valuable black hardwood that fetched high prices in Europe. They brought with them the instruments of destruction. Not just axes and saws, but something far more insidious. They brought rats. Black rats and brown rats, stowaways on every ship, escaped into the forests. They brought pigs, released to breed and provide future meat for passing ships. They brought monkeys, dogs, and cats, and with these introductions the balance shattered. The rats found the dodo nests, a single egg unguarded sitting on the forest floor, an easy meal. The pigs rooted through the undergrowth, devouring eggs and chicks. The monkeys raided nests with clever hands. The dodo, which had never needed to defend its young, had no strategy, no behavior to counter this onslaught. The chicks were slow-growing, vulnerable for months. The reproductive rate was low, 1 egg per season. The losses were catastrophic. But it was not just the introduced animals. Humans continued to hunt, not for food but for sport, for curiosity, for the sheer ease of it. Sailors would herd dodos into pens, keeping them for fresh meat. They would kill them in numbers, salting the flesh for long voyages. The dodo, trusting and slow, was defenseless. Reports from the 17th century describe scenes of slaughter. Dozens of dodos clubbed to death in a single day, their carcasses left to rot because the meat was too poor to bother with. The destruction was casual, thoughtless. The dodo was not seen as rare or precious. It was simply there, an oddity, a resource to be used. No one imagined it could disappear. Extinction was not yet a concept humanity understood. Animals were infinite, nature inexhaustible. The idea that human action could erase an entire species from existence had not yet entered the collective consciousness. Habitat destruction accelerated the decline. The Dutch cleared forests for timber and farmland. The ebony trees, the palms, the native plants that provided food for the dodo were felled and burned. The landscape changed. The dodo's world shrank, fragmented. The forests that remained were overrun with invasive species. Rats, pigs, and monkeys were not the only invaders. Plants arrived too. Foreign grasses, shrubs, and trees that outcompeted the natives. The ecological web unraveled. The dodo, already under siege, lost its food sources. Starvation joined predation and hunting as a cause of death. The population plummeted, from thousands to hundreds to dozens. Sightings became rare. The last widely accepted sighting of a living dodo in the wild was in 1662, less than 70 years after the Dutch arrival. A species that had existed for millions of years, wiped out in the blink of an evolutionary eye. There are no photographs of the dodo, no film, no recordings. All we have are a handful of written accounts, a few sketches and paintings, and a scattering of bones. The images we have are often crude, exaggerated, or based on second-hand descriptions. Some show the dodo as grotesquely fat, almost comical. Others depict it more realistically. The most famous image, a painting by Roland Savory, shows a plump, somewhat sad-looking bird standing in a landscape that may or may not be Mauritius. Savory likely never saw a live dodo in the wild. He may have painted from a captive specimen brought to Europe or from descriptions and earlier sketches. The accuracy is debated. But this image and others like it are all we have, ghosts on canvas, echoes of a lost world. A few dodos were taken alive to Europe. Shipped in cages, they were displayed as curiosities, exotic oddities from a distant land. One was recorded in London in the early 1600s, another in Prague. These birds did not survive long. Captivity, stress, poor diet, and the cold European climate killed them quickly. When they died, some were stuffed and placed in museums. But taxidermy was crude in those days. The specimens decayed. Feathers fell out. Skin rotted. By the 18th century, most had been discarded. One specimen held at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford was in such poor condition that in 1755 the curator ordered it burned. Only the head and one foot were saved at the last moment. These fragments, along with a few bones scattered in museums around the world, are the only physical remains of the dodo. Everything else is dust. For a long time, the dodo was almost forgotten. A footnote in natural history, a curiosity mentioned in sailors' logs, but in the 19th century, interest revived. Scientists began to study extinction. The dodo became a symbol, the poster child for human-caused extinction. In 1865, Lewis Carroll published Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, featuring a dodo as a character. The bird was immortalized in popular culture, forever linked with the strange and the vanished. The phrase "dead as a dodo" entered the language, a shorthand for extinction, for irreversible loss. The dodo's fame grew in death far beyond anything it had known in life. Modern science has worked to reconstruct the dodo from fragments. Bones have been measured, analyzed, compared. DNA has been extracted from the few remaining specimens, revealing the dodo's closest living relative, the Nicobar pigeon of Southeast Asia. Computer models have been built to simulate how the dodo moved, how it fed, how it lived. We know now that the dodo was not the slow, stupid, clumsy creature of myth. It was well-adapted, successful, a product of millions of years of evolution. Its extinction was not a failure of the species. It was a failure of humanity, a failure to recognize the fragility of island ecosystems, a failure to control our impact, a failure to value what we had before it was gone. The forests of Mauritius today are a shadow of what they were. Much of the native vegetation is gone, replaced by introduced species. The ebony forests have been logged to near extinction. The dodo's ecological partners, the trees whose seeds it dispersed, have suffered. Some, like the tambalak oak tree, also known as the dodo tree, were once thought to depend entirely on the dodo for seed germination. The theory was that the seeds needed to pass through the dodo's digestive system to sprout. Without the dodo, the tree could not reproduce. This idea has since been challenged and largely debunked, but it captured the imagination. It suggested that the extinction of the dodo had ripple effects, that the loss of one species could destabilize an entire ecosystem. And in truth, it did. The dodo was a keystone species, a seed disperser, a part of the forest's rhythm. Its absence left a gap that has never been filled. Other species on Mauritius followed the dodo into oblivion. The Mauritius blue pigeon, the red rail, the broad-billed parrot, the Mauritius owl, the giant tortoises, the giant skinks. One by one they vanished. The island that had been a sanctuary became a graveyard. Today, Mauritius has one of the worst extinction records of any place on Earth. The introduction of invasive species, habitat destruction, and hunting decimated the native fauna. Conservation efforts in recent decades have saved some species from the brink. The Mauritius kestrel, once the rarest bird in the world, has been brought back from fewer than 10 individuals. The pink pigeon, the echo parakeet, have been rescued through intensive breeding and habitat restoration. But the dodo is beyond saving. Extinction is final. There has been talk in recent years of de-extinction. Scientists have proposed using DNA from dodo bones to reconstruct the genome, to splice it into the cells of a living relative, to grow a dodo in a lab to bring it back. The technology is advancing. The Nicobar pigeon's genome has been sequenced. Comparisons have been made, but the challenges are immense. The dodo's DNA is fragmented, degraded. Filling in the gaps would require guesswork. And even if a dodo could be created, what then? Where would it live? The forests of Mauritius are gone. The ecosystem that supported the dodo no longer exists. A resurrected dodo would be a creature out of time, a novelty, a living museum piece. It would not be a restoration. It would be a curiosity, perhaps a cruelty. The dodo evolved over millions of years in a specific context. That context is lost. Bringing back the dodo would not undo the damage. It would not restore the forest. It would not erase the lesson. Some things, once broken, cannot be fixed. The dodo's extinction was not inevitable. It was a choice, even if an unconscious one. The Dutch did not set out to exterminate the dodo. They simply did not care. They saw an island full of resources and took what they wanted. They introduced species without thought to consequence. They hunted without restraint. They cleared forests without considering the future. The dodo was collateral damage in the pursuit of profit and expansion, and that is the true tragedy. The dodo did not die because it was weak. It died because it was in the way, because humans arrived and changed everything. Because isolation, which had protected it for so long, became a trap. The lessons of the dodo are clear, but they are not always heeded. Island species remain among the most vulnerable on Earth. Hawaii, New Zealand, Madagascar, the Galapagos, all have suffered waves of extinction following human arrival. Flightless birds, in particular, are at risk. The moa of New Zealand, the elephant birds of Madagascar, the great auk of the North Atlantic, all gone. The kakapo, the takai, the kiwi, all critically endangered. Islands are laboratories of evolution, but they are also traps. Species that evolve in isolation often lack the tools to cope with sudden change. They have no experience with predators, no instinct for caution, no genetic diversity to buffer against disease or environmental shifts. When humans arrive, bringing rats, cats, dogs, pigs, goats, and a host of other invasive species, the native fauna is often doomed. The pattern repeats again and again, and yet we continue to make the same mistakes. But there is hope, fragile and hard one. Conservation has learned from the dodo. We now understand the importance of biosecurity, of controlling invasive species, of protecting habitats before they are lost. Islands around the world have become the focus of intense conservation efforts. Rats have been eradicated from hundreds of islands, allowing native birds to recover. Predator-proof fences protect sanctuaries. Breeding programs have saved species on the brink. The Mauritius kestrel, the Chatham Island black robin, the Seychelles magpie robin, all were down to handfuls of individuals. All have been brought back. It is expensive, labor-intensive, and requires decades of commitment, but it works. We have the tools, we have the knowledge. What we need is the will. The dodo's legacy is a double one. It is a symbol of loss, of failure, of the consequences of carelessness. But it is also a call to action, a reminder that extinction is not abstract. It is real, it is final, and it is often preventable. Every species we lose diminishes the world. Every extinction is a library burned, a song silenced, a thread pulled from the tapestry of life. The dodo cannot be brought back, but other species can be saved. The forests of Mauritius cannot be restored to their original state, but they can be healed, replanted, protected. The invasive species cannot be entirely removed, but they can be controlled. The damage cannot be undone, but it can be stopped from spreading. To stand on Mauritius today and look out over the forests is to see a landscape haunted by absence. The dodo is not there. It will never be there again. But in the rustle of leaves, in the call of the pink pigeon, in the flight of the kestrel, there is life. Life that was saved, life that persists. The dodo is gone, but the island is not dead. It is wounded, but it endures. And in that endurance there is a kind of hope. A hope that we can learn, that we can change, that we can do better. The dodo's story is not just about a bird. It is about us. About our capacity for destruction, but also for preservation. About our ability to ignore the consequences of our actions, but also to recognize them and act. The dodo trusted us in its way. It had no fear because it had no reason to fear. We betrayed that trust. We took its world and destroyed it, but we do not have to keep making that mistake. We can protect what remains. We can restore what we can. We can ensure that no other species follows the dodo into the darkness. The dodo is lost, but its legend endures. A reminder, a warning, a symbol. A bird that could not fly, that lived in paradise, that knew no fear, and that paid the ultimate price for its innocence. The lost legend of Mauritius. A creature that once was and now is not. A ghost of the Indian Ocean. A name that will echo through history as long as humans remember. And in that remembering there is power. The power to mourn, to learn, and to change. The dodo is dead. Long live the memory. And may that memory drive us to protect the living, to cherish the rare, to defend the vulnerable. For once a species is gone, no regret, no science, no longing can bring it back. The dodo taught us that. Let us not forget.